so good to be here with you. When I was looking at the text assigned for today, knowing that it was going to be my first sermon here, imagine how excited I was to hear Jesus' words for us. Whoever comes to me and doesn't hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Great, so I get to preach about hating your family. Or maybe I could talk about giving up all your possessions, just start off with a stewardship sermon. I know that this text isn't really about hating your family, but it gave me a good excuse to try something different. So instead, I've decided to make my Old Testament professors proud and preach from Deuteronomy, a book that's famous for being filled with obscure laws about stoning unruly children and specific farming techniques. Those are really in there. But really, Deuteronomy is all one big story. Moses has led these wandering people out of Egypt and into the wilderness and is making his final speech, his final plea to these people before he dies at that very end of the book. But this speech is made when he and the people are on the brink of the promised land. Our lesson today comes from almost the end of the book, after Moses has told them their own story, which has two major pieces, the unfaithful people and the faithful God. I think it's helpful for us to hear the story that Moses tells so that we can understand what our lesson today is telling us. The first part of the story is a story of frustration and failure, of golden calves and grumbling about food. Moses, at one point, even tells the people that they have been stubborn and rebellious. These people repeatedly miss the mark for what God wants, and instead, they try to make it work without God. Is that ever our story? I can tell you that it's mine. One writer commenting on this text says, "When faith falters, selfishness enters in. As we forget our Maker, we become convinced that we must make it on our own." I know that we've all just met, but I'm going to tell you a little secret about myself. Sometimes I like the law. I want to know what the rules are. I want to make it on my own. Sometimes I even think I want the law instead of the gospel. Shh, don't tell. I want to know what is required and then do the required things. All of this, of course, hangs on the somewhat ridiculous idea that I would be good enough to fulfill all of these demands. I can only hope that some of you share this same dangerous attraction. But here Moses clearly tells the people, you tried it your way. How did that go for you? And they all sheepishly look around and say, not very well. After all of this stubborn and rebellious business, Moses then tells them the second part of their story. God has been faithful. Look at all the Lord has done for you. God brought you out of Egypt and everything that Egypt was about. Captivity, enslavement, idolatry, hopelessness, subjugation, fear, violence, but you never have to go back there. God has prepared a place for you and we're almost there. God provided sustenance when you thought you had nothing, manna and quail from heaven, a leader to guide you when you get lost. And over and over and over again, throughout Deuteronomy, Moses repeats himself, this is because the Lord loves you. The Lord's heart is set on you in love. The Lord will again take delight in prospering you. Moses reminds all of his people, and all of us, that this relationship is intact because of God's faithfulness and not our faithfulness. If Moses had to say that a few times, then I will too. Our relationship with God is what it is because God is faithful to us, not because of the things we do to prove how good we are or how worthy we are. Despite my secret longing to make myself right in God's eyes, it never works. It didn't work for the Israelites thousands of years ago, and it doesn't work today. We always mess it up somehow, but God remains faithful. In Deuteronomy, even when God gives the Ten Commandments, the rules to follow, as it were, there's one that is the capstone of them all. You may have heard this passage before, but it's so lovely, I want you to listen to it again now. The culmination of the commandments. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand, fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You know what that says to me? It says that God and Moses, as God's messenger, want us to realize that it's about a relationship to God, not about being flawless. That it's about having God in your heart and in your life, when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. This doesn't sound like a demand for perfection, but like a plea to be remembered and included. In fact, though we mostly think of commands as demands from God, the Hebrew word for commandment comes from the word for attachment or bond. God is showing us and reminding us what it looks like to be connected to the Lord. At the end of Moses' great long storytelling with the two parts of the unfaithful people and the faithful God, the story of their wilderness wanderings, we get today's reading. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him, for that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. At first glance, that reading may sound like Moses saying, be perfect or else, right? But it's like we can feel Moses' heart here, knowing that he doesn't have much longer with this group that he has so lovingly led for so long. This is his farewell address, his legacy speech, and he says to them, in effect, don't forget about God. I have just told you your story. Look how great God has been. Don't abandon God. Don't break your connection to the Lord. I don't think Moses wants to bring them out of slavery in Egypt just to re-enslave them in some legalistic system that's just as demanding. Moses instead pleads for us to renew our love for God. Even the obeying word literally means listening to the Lord's voice. Some translations at verse 19 say, oh, that you would choose life, listening to his voice and holding fast to him, or listening obediently to him, firmly embracing him. All of these are words that talk about a continued commitment to remember God's faithfulness to us, and to let go of the familiar and sometimes enticing bonds of slavery to the law, and instead firmly embrace the terrifying freedom of being people of God. As one translation reminds us in verse 20, this is the key to your life. We will always mess it up. Moses' people did, as he so kindly reminded them. And we do too. And yet God will always, always, relentlessly, abundantly, creatively come after us and take care of us out of love. And it is this love, not our merit, that makes us who we are, a people of God. One of my favorite bands called Mumford & Sons has a chorus on their opening track that speaks right to this. Love will not betray you, dismay or enslave you. It will set you free to be more like the man you were made to be. Love will not betray you, dismay or enslave you. It will set you free to be more like the man you were made to be. That was Moses' chorus throughout Deuteronomy and today's lesson, and is a chorus we need to be reminded of ourselves. Amen.
Amen.
We continue with hymn number 770.